as we go into this period of transition, there's likely to be more fire-related events. And by that, it could be, wildfires, it could be volcanic eruptions, it could be explosions of any kind. The prophecy was actually fulfilled in June last year. And after that, all the tribes, they got together, they had this big tribal ceremony. And people said that this is a sign of impending changes. And they took it as a blessing as well as a warning.
Fall, and probably no later than next spring of 2026, that humanity would have something called the Bottleneck Event, which might be a series of events, right? But it's a period of time where things are very fated and destined and karmic, and there's very little free will. And one of the aspects they've revealed to me now is that everyone's going to have something, everyone will be, at least temporarily, be psychically upgraded, and that the process of that will also cause them to have basically a life review, like people who have near-death experiences have. All right. Hello, and welcome once again to White Lotus of Light Conversational series. And once again, for his third time back, a very rare third timer here on White Lotus of Light, I am blessed and honored to have Bibhu Dev Misra, fantastic, amazing, brilliant man who is the author of Yuga Shift. Here's my copy that's signed by him. He has his own website, Ancient Inquiries. And Bibhu, we're just going to jump right into it because I had the intro in the introduction section. And so you were saying that the increase in wildfires that are being seen around the world, you believe it's connected to the ekpyrosis, or the sort of interregnum period between the Kali Yuga and the Dwapara Yuga. Did you want to go into that more?
Yeah, Ian, what I mentioned in my book is that the ascending and the descending arcs, they're separated by two extended periods of transition. And the Greeks used to call them cataclysmus, which means deluge, and ekpyrosis, which means the world is destroyed and renewed by fire. We did go through the period of cataclysmus or deluge because there was this period called the Younger Dryas between 10,900 to 9,700 BC. When temperatures had dropped by nearly 10 to 15 degrees Celsius all over the world, and it was freezing cold everywhere. That was the time that the Ice Age megafauna were almost entirely killed off, and there were some comet impacts which happened during that time. And now we are exactly at the opposite point of the Yuga cycle from that there. And we are now entering into a period called ekpyrosis, when the world is renewed by fire. And one of the things that I mentioned in my book was that since fire is going to be the agency of purification. And when I say fire, it's not only external fire, but it's also the internal fire, the fire of wisdom and knowledge and love. That also purifies you from inside. But it's also external fire. And what I was anticipating is that as we go into this period of transition, there's likely to be more fire-related events. And by that, it could be wildfires, it could be volcanic eruptions, it could be explosions of any kind. That's also fire. And so I was really surprised by the intensity of the wildfire which happened in LA right at the beginning of the year, right in January. And I was looking at that, extremely ferocious, almost unstoppable fire that was happening there. It's almost as if nature had gone berserk and was kind of rebuking us that, this is what you get for being so insanely materialistic and for moving away from the path of divine unfoldment, which is what we were supposed to do on our planet. So it looked to me like it was a signal that the period of ekpyrosis has already commenced with that fire. And 2025 is the year of transformation. This is when the transformation begins. This is when we get out of the Kali Yuga. 21st March is the a specific date, but the specific date doesn't really matter so much because the change happens over a long period of time. And by all accounts, we might have already entered that period of change and transformation. And right now, there are so many fires burning everywhere. In the US, in the Carolinas, you have those fires going. In Japan, they're facing the worst fires in 3 decades. So it's continuing though these kind of events, which tells me that yeah, I mean, ecpiracies is for real, and we could be in for more such events in future. And there was one miracle which happened in the Pacific Palisades area where you had the most intense fire. Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda, who's the disciple of Yukteswar, and he set up a ashram there. It's called the Lake Shrine Ashram of the Self-Realization Fellowship. And the fire had burned all around that ashram, but it didn't destroy any of the structures within that complex. So it just burned all around that whole place. And it is kind of amazing. It's almost as if the fire was conscious and it realized that there's a very powerful spiritual energy here. And let me just, burn around it and not disturb that place, which could also be a message to us that after this period of expires is over, only that which is aligned with spirit, that is going to survive. And what is aligned with matter and materialistic ambitions and materialistic, desires, that is not going to survive into the higher age.
Mm. So, yeah, I think that is really interesting. I think some of these fires, and I think it's all part of the chaos of that interregnum period. I think some of those fires are being started by arsonists either on the ground or I didn't initially put any stock in it, but I think some of these have been started by those directed energy weapons, and that there's been intentional sabotage around the systems to suppress the fire for sure. That's indisputable. That happened in Hawaii, right, at the Lahaina fire, and then now again in LA. There was definitely intentional malfeasance to make it spread. I don't think it in any way takes away from your point, but I think it's interesting because it's almost like the corruption is eating itself and burning itself out. They have a bad plan for it, but I believe it's going to go in a completely different direction. So there, you also talk about on your website, and this is related, about the Sioux prophecy of the white buffalo calf woman being fulfilled. And it's interesting, which I'll get to in a minute, because it dovetails into this prophecy I recently got from the angels. So did you want to talk a little about that Sioux prophecy and how it's been fulfilled and how it ties in?
Yeah, the Sioux people, I think a couple of thousand years ago, they were blessed with the appearance of the white buffalo calf woman, who's one of their savior figures. She came down, she appeared in the form of a white buffalo, and then she changed into that of a woman, and she came to the people and gave them all their sacred ceremonies, the laws, and after she returned, there was a growth in prosperity in the land. I mean, the people were kind of starving before she came down, and then after she came back, the fertility and abundance was restored in the lands. And she told them that she's going to return at the close of this particular cycle, and her appearance is going to be signified by the appearance of a white buffalo calf in the wild. So when the Sioux people see a white buffalo calf in the wild, they'll know that she's about to return to the world and to purify our planet and to restore the harmony and balance which has been lost over this cycle. And this prophecy was fulfilled in the month of June last year, when for the first time they saw white buffalo calf in the wild in the Yellowstone National Park. Prior to that, there were a few white buffalo calves which were born in captivity, but those were not taken as a sign of the fulfillment of the prophecy, because in captivity there's a lot of genetic manipulation and crossbreeding which takes place. So they didn't regard the captive white buffalo calves as a sign of the fulfillment of the prophecy. So the prophecy was actually fulfilled in June last year. And after that, all the tribes, they got together, they had this big tribal ceremony. And people said that this is a sign of impending changes. And they took it as a blessing as well as a warning. Blessing because it means there's going to be a restoration of balance in the land, a return of prosperity and abundance. But a warning because it means that there's also going to be a cleansing and purification, which always entails a lot of destruction and suffering. So, and what happened afterwards is that there has been a spate of flooding events across the world. We saw this snowstorm in the Arabian desert, which almost never happens. We saw floods in Sahara, and then there has been floods all over the world, everywhere. And the reason could be because the white buffalo calf woman is related to the Egyptian goddess Isis, because she also has this, she wears this horn of a buffalo or a horn of a cow. And both Isis and Hathor, both of them wear this horn of a cow on their heads. And they're regarded as cow goddesses because they provide fertility and abundance in addition to all their other blessings to humanity. And Isis is also regarded as the bringer of the Nile floods, because Isis was identified with the star Sirius. And whenever Sirius rose heliacally in the month of July in Egypt, it signified the beginning of the floods in Egypt. So Isis is the big bringer of the floods. And so there's a connection there, because the white buffalo calf woman appears in June, and soon afterwards, you have these extremely strange flooding events everywhere. It's almost as if some kind of a climatic switch has been activated, and that's causing all of these flooding events.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And so it's extra interesting to me because, as we've talked about in our other conversations on this channel, there's a lot of crossover between the information that I've gotten from the angelic realms and what's come through your research into various Vedic texts, the ancient Greek texts, and so forth, all the different sacred texts that you collated your work from. And the angels, and it's actually recorded on a prior episode that's on my Patreon, they said that after March 21st of 2025, that there would be basically fires and floods would go around the globe, but it would be a fire of anger that would sweep across the globe, and there would be anger of many different, there would be anger for many different reasons, but it would burn incredibly hot. The angels also said that, this might interest you, that karma is elemental water that's frozen and unable to be processed within a lifetime, intense emotion that's frozen and unable to be processed. Instead of being liquid, it becomes frozen, and then it can't process. And for example, when someone gets murdered, they have very intense emotion and they're not able to process it because they die. Usually a murderer can't really process what they did to this other person in a single lifetime. It's too intense and they can't work it out with that person. So the angels have said that one way to look at karma is that it's this frozen water element, and that this fire that's going to sweep across the globe, it's going to cause all this repressed and suppressed emotion in humanity around the globe to liquefy. And at the same time, there will be a flood of other emotions and this huge emotional release, because the end of the Kali Yuga also marks the end of this huge karmic cycle of all the negative karma that's been accumulated since the end of the Sat Yuga till now. And that not all of it is going to be able to be resolved. And so there's going to be this huge explosion of the karma. And right now, what the angels have been emphasizing is to spend time doing shadow work, integrating your shadow and healing your trauma in order to, during these chaotic times to come, be able to navigate these kind of difficulties, because there's a lot of chaos coming. That's one thing that what the angels have said and what your research has pointed to, it's in total agreement on. And so something else I think that's interesting and might be related to this idea of fire cleansing the earth, which I see it as, yes, it will take an outer manifestation, but what the angels have told me is that the great flood this time is primarily internal. It's an emotional experience of humanity rather than like the great deluge at the end of the Ice Age, which was physical in nature. And so I wonder, with the fire, right, the fire sweeping around the earth, the I always say it wrong, ekpyrosis, you've pointed to, you had theorized this in your book, and now there's data to support it. There's a recent discovery that the central black hole, sometimes called the Galactic Nucleus, which can be either active or dormant, has entered its active phase, since it's been seen emitting brilliant flares of light on a daily basis. Earlier, it used to emit occasional X-ray flares. So this is something that you said would happen as the Kali Yuga come to an end. Can you explain why and about the negative ionization and how that impacts consciousness? It seems to me that the active galactic nucleus, the sun, the earth, and human minds are all transceivers. They both transmit and receive. So sorry that was long, but this is a very interesting little nugget here. Did you want to talk about it?
Yeah, what I said in my book was that this fluctuation in consciousness, this ascending and descending cycles that we go through in course of the Yuga cycle, it's governed and regulated by the radiation from the central black hole, which the Vedic sages refer to as Brahma, the central creative principle. And for the last few centuries, the black hole has been extremely quiet. It just used to emit frequent, occasional X-ray flares. And that's what a black hole does when it's about to enter into its active state. And what I had proposed in my book is that sometime around 2025 or a bit later, the black hole is going to enter into its active phase. And when it enters into its active phase, the black hole starts emitting radiation at all frequencies, starts off at visible frequencies, and then goes from infrared to gamma rays, all the frequencies. And it emits so much frequencies, so much radiation that the nucleus becomes extremely luminous. And it starts to look like the central sun of the galaxy, and it outshines all of the light from all of the stars from the galaxy put together. So it becomes so luminous. And that's the phase that we're about to enter into. And what I found out is that just a few days back, they reported that the James Webb Telescope has been observing the central black hole over the past 1 year. And over the past 1 year, the black hole has been emitting very bright flares of light on a daily basis, on top of a very steady level of smaller flashes. And then you have these sudden brilliant flashes of light. And it keeps happening throughout the day. And it's been happening over the last 1 year, which means over the last 1 year, sometime in 2024, the black hole had already switched on to its active phase. And we are right now at the very beginning stages of that active phase. And from here, it can only get more and more bright and more radiant. So the energies have already started coming in. And these are the energies that give us the genetic upgrades, the positive genetic mutations, which kind of increase our cranial capacity, increases our physical size, our lifespans become much longer. And even since any high frequency radiation is ionizing in nature, what it does, it kills off all the disease causing germs. And it also creates a lot of negative ions in the atmosphere, which is very good for our mental health and well-being. So that is the direction in which we have already started moving. And I was really happy and amazed to see this piece of information because, this was a prediction that I had made on the basis of my study, and it's already coming true. So we're already on the ascending curve. So although we are going through a period of transition, the fact is that we are already on the ascending curve. And this period of transition is just going to be a bit of a bumpy ride for a few years. And after that, we are pretty much on that ascending curve in which things will just keep on getting better and better for the whole of humanity. So, I mean, that's a really good piece of news that I heard in the last 1 week or so.
So one thing where we kind of have possibly differing opinions, although what you just said kind of actually strengthens what I've been told, and what the angels have told me is that we're going to enter this period of time between now and basically 2027 or 2028 that'll be very difficult, right? Like any time now, there'll be difficulties globally to some degree, and it will flare up more some places than others, right? Like obviously the Middle East is not looking good. Ukraine area is not looking good. There's places in East Asia that look questionable, like Taiwan and so forth, right? So they've also said that quite a lot of people will die, and that'll be due to primarily starvation, but then also a lot of people, it's no secret now, they've discovered that there's immune deficiency syndrome that's been caused by the thing that billions of people took And there was different batches. Some were saline and some were not refrigerated properly, or were composed of different things, because they knew where the batches went and who got which batches. But it was like a one-way mirror where they could see where their products went of all the different kinds they had, which did various different things, I'm convinced. But the receivers had no idea what they were getting unless they were able to look into the batch numbers and so forth. So there's a lot of evidence pointing to that there's going to be fatalities are going to peak this year and next from that, and that we're really going to see big waves of that. And a lot of science is pointing towards this, and increases in productions of the kind of protein that causes all the problems, right? The thing that kills people. And so I definitely agree that there's obviously chaos coming, where I think that in the past we've somewhat parted ways, but maybe what you just said sort of supports what the angels have told me, is that after this thing they call the Bottleneck Event, which I will just, they've now given me more information. You might find this interesting, Bibhu, given what you just said about this ionizing radiation and this energy being emitted from the active galactic nucleus. They said that humanity sometime in basically the next year from now, and probably no sooner than next fall, and probably no later than next spring of 2026, that humanity would have something called the Bottleneck Event, which might be a series of events, right? But it's a period of time where things are very fated and destined and karmic, and there's very little free will. And one of the aspects they've revealed to me now is that everyone's going to have something, everyone will be at least temporarily be psychically upgraded, and that the process of that will also cause them to have basically a life review, like people who have near-death experiences have, and that the people will review their lives and will have no choice but to face their own shadow and trauma. It'll be kind of like in that movie Clockwork Orange, where they held the guy's eyes open and forced him to look at it, but it'll be, people will be forced to look at their own shadow and trauma. And, you know, to a large degree, that's the karma they've accrued in this life, the karma they've received and the karma they've dealt out in many ways. And so the angels have said a lot of people won't be able to handle it, that they'll just, one way or the other, they'll die directly as it. They'll commit suicide, or they'll have a heart attack or stroke, or they'll become super violent, and other people, just to defend themselves, will have to kill them to put them down. And I now wonder if this cleansing of fire is in part this fire from the active galactic nucleus sweeping over our planet, possibly something like a solar flare or some reaction from our sun getting, when the active galactic nucleus turns on, our sun responding to that and maybe adding to, amplifying or retransmitting that frequency, and then that hitting the earth and the Schumann resonance, you know, changing, and then this causing this to happen. I think that during the descending Kali Yugas, pure destruction makes perfect sense to me, because you're just bottoming out, you're just getting worse and worse and worse. It makes intuitive sense to me that on the upward ascending, that even in the Kali Yuga itself, things have gotten better, materially at least, right? Materially at least, like, I'm sorry, but 800 BC, I don't want to live in that compared to right now. There's no question. Maybe people are more immoral now, but I doubt it. They were killing each other all over the place back then. So, you know, there's a lot of evidence that this is the most peaceful time in human history, crazily enough. So I'm just wondering, what do you think about the possibility that maybe this fire doesn't result in like 98% of the population dying and a complete hard reset of civilization, but rather there is a big die-off, and especially a die-off of those of this lower consciousness during this process, but then that those that remain take the current civilization and build it up from there? What are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
I mean, that's what I mentioned in my book. I never spoke about massive destruction happening, because
Okay.
what's happening is there are many things which are going on. First of all, the black hole switching on means that all of this new energy which is coming into our planet, it is going to dissolve these egoic blockages, and it's going to help us get more in tune with our inner self. So it's helping some people to kind of expand their awareness, to kind of fulfill their inner purpose. So it's helping us, it's pushing us in the upward direction. But there are going to be a lot of people who are not going to be in resonance with this vibration. So any structure, any ideology, any belief system which is not in resonance with these high frequency vibrations, and these vibrations that are coming in are the high frequency, very high frequency vibrations. It's of love, it's of unity consciousness, it's of harmony and truth and balance. It is not about greed and selfishness and hatred that's been going on right now. So those who are not in resonance with these vibrations, they won't be able to handle this, and they'll just go crazy. I mean, many things could happen. There could be internal conflicts, people just tearing down institutions by themselves. There could be wars, there could be revolutions, people getting crazy, like you mentioned, people getting angry and violent because they're not able to process and align with these vibrations. So both of these things are going to go on in parallel. On one hand, you'll see some people ascending in their awareness, ascending in their vibrations, becoming more loving, more balanced, more peaceful, getting more truth and more harmony. And on the other hand, you'll see this collapse. Both of them will go on in parallel. The collapse and the ascension will go on in parallel. And that's the period of transition. And in my book, I spoke about this period lasting from roughly 2025 to 2040, that 15-year window, which I believe is the most crucial. And after that, things will be dramatically different, because not only will we have survivors who are completely in alignment with their inner spirit and in alignment with the vibrations, and therefore ready to take forward our civilization, but the interdimensional gateways will also open up. So all of those things that we thought are just mythological figures, the gods and the sages and angels, which we currently regard as mythological figures, that doorway will be opened and will be reintegrated with our cosmic family. And that's going to be one of the major changes that is going to happen, because as long as we think that we are the only masters of this planet, the only masters of the universe, and there's nothing out there, that is what breeds a lot of this arrogance and a lot of this recklessness that we have in our society. And once we understand that, no, we are part of a larger cosmic family, that there's a greater divine plan for the human civilization, there's a reason why we go through these cycles, and that we need to act and behave in a particular manner, and that we're here for a purpose, which is to raise our consciousness, that we are going through evolutionary journey, and we can't just do and think whatever we want. Then that cosmic integration and that awareness is going to drive the ascending cycle. So it's not just about the energies which are coming in. It's not just about the collapse and the destruction that is going to happen. It's also about the reintegration with the cosmic family and the understanding that we are part of a greater whole, and we have a definite purpose that we are here on this planet for. So that whole thing, I believe, will play out in the next 15 odd years. And after that, things will be completely different. It will be kind of like a bad dream that we have gone through, and we are now waking up to a new reality from 2040 onwards.
Fantastic. Yeah. Wow. I have some follow-ups, but I think I'll get to some of those in part two. So I guess part of the reason, and my apologies if I've misrepresented your opinion, I think part of it is this you talk about this discovery of the asteroid 2024 YR4, and you talk about chances of like that impacting us or some of these other asteroids. And I think that's why I had it in my head, because that to me is always like civilization ending event. It's possible that maybe if it's small enough, it wouldn't end civilization. It would just maybe obliterate like, some portion of a continent or something. But did you want to talk about these asteroids, including the asteroid Apophis and the Tauriid swarm, which is it the Taurids? Is that the one that's the leftovers from the Younger Dryas impact? Is that same stream? Do you want to talk to that? Speak to that?
Yeah, so recently they found out a particular asteroid called, which they termed as 2024 YR4. And they were saying that it has a specific chance of hitting us in 2032. This initially the estimate was at around 3%. And a lot of people told me that, oh, Bibhu, you mentioned 2032 and 2036 in your book, because those are the 2 years that we are passing through the center of the Taurid swarm. And that is the swarm that is responsible for the transitional events that happens at the end of every yuga. And I said that, you know, it has a 3% chance of hitting us, but it has a 97% chance of not hitting us. And I said that, no, it's not going to be an asteroid, you know, a dumb old space rock that is going to just blow us up into smithereens. That's not what I expect is going to happen. See, what happens when we go through the Taurid swarm is that there are a lot of dormant comets in there. And these comets are, they shift between a dormant and an active state. And when these comets become active, what it does is that comes close to the Earth, and the energetic emissions from those comets, it has a very powerful impact on our psychology. And it basically begins a period of extreme soul searching. And that's what you might call a life review, that when that very powerful energy source comes to our close to our atmosphere, it begins a period of soul searching and life review. And that is also, and the energies of a comet can also create a lot of anger and violence, because comets have also been associated with wars and violence and the destruction of kingdoms and revolutions and so on. All the possible evils that you can think of were also associated with comets. And comets are not bodies which move in a random way. They are regulated. The comets were regarded by the ancients as the messengers of the gods, as the signs, the stars of their gods, as the vahanas. In Hindu, we call them the vahanas, the animal mounts of the gods, because they are represented as horses, as birds. And when you see these images of the gods, they're shown riding across the sky on a horse, or on a horse chariot, or on a bird. These are all comets, because comets were also represented in a very similar manner. So these comets are divinely regulated. They're not coming here in a random manner and just saying, oh, boom, everybody's dead. No, they are divinely regulated, and they come here for a specific purpose. And that purpose could be an energetic emission, and just to, you know, create the conditions for an ascension, and also create the condition for a destruction, because people might get so agitated by the energies of that comet, they could start a big war and, you know, take us to Armageddon. And in addition to that, they could also hit us in very strategic locations. It could just sweep all the geosynchronous satellites of the Earth's atmosphere, and then boom, you can't fight back anymore. It could just hit some of the power centers and destroy where they feel there's a big concentration of evil. So it acts in a very intelligent, regulated manner. This is not a random destruction that I'm talking about. The comets are the messengers of the gods. And when we pass through the Taurid swarm in 2032 and 2036, that is what I anticipate is going to happen. It's going to be a very controlled, very regulated, very deliberate destruction of evil in all its forms. And if any form of evil, that is just not going to be able to escape that destruction, because you're dealing with powers out here that are beyond your comprehension. So if you think that you're going to hide in a bunker and escape your fate, it's just not going to work out, because it's not as if the laws of karma will stop working inside an underground bunker. I mean, nobody can design a karma-proof bunker, not even Elon Musk. So that's not going to happen. You're going to face your destiny, whatever it is. And so, which is why I think of the years 2032 and 2036 has been extremely crucial in this period of transition. And so this particular asteroid which was discovered, now it turns out that it's not actually going to hit us. NASA has downgraded the probability to around 0%, 0 point something percent, which means it's not going to hit us anymore. But what it does is that it puts the importance of that particular date into the public consciousness. So now we know that the 2032 date is somehow important in this whole process of transition.
That's so.
And the same is true. And the same is true for Apophis. Apophis, when it was discovered, they said that it's going to hit us in 2029. Then they said, no, it's not going to hit us in 2029. It's just going to pass very close to our planet. Then they said it's going to hit us in 2036. And now they're saying that, no, it's not going to hit us in 2036 anymore. It's going to pass very close to our planet, between the moon and the Earth, but it's not going to hit us. But what it does is that it puts the importance of the dates 2029 and 2036 into perspective, into the public consciousness, because these two dates are separated by 7 years, which I believe are the 7 years of tribulation described in the Revelation. So I think that from 2029 to 2036 will be the point, the years when we'll face the greatest and the most intense transformation of this transitional period.
Wow, that's so interesting. I have bunches of things that I want to follow up on, but I think they'll be in the part two. So let's see. So let's talk about how you see the current geopolitical changes and realignments, which are just happening everywhere, and the so-called deep state losing some of its power. And I want to put forward that I talk a lot about on this channel. And for new viewers to the channel, check out my Shadow War series and Venetian Black Nobility series. But I talk about this idea of different levels of consciousness, as the angels have told me in this super materialistic, slavery oriented, dead materialism. They believe in slavery, harm of children. It's actually important to keep open the opposite portals of the ones you just discussed, the ones to the angels and the higher realms that will open. They have kept open portals to the lower realms with this harm of children, right? And a big piece of news we're discussing a lot in the United States is this Epstein list and how super powerful people are obviously being protected. And it's pretty obvious who Epstein was working for, what country on the west side of the Mediterranean he clearly was working for, and not anyone else, and anything else is BS. But what the angels have told me is that that force that has the harm of children is called the Molochian force. And that really low human consciousness is about to fall off or be excised like a tumor, and it will leave a higher level of consciousness that still isn't ideal, which is this Luciferian consciousness, which still has some slightly ruthless quality to it, still meritocracy and rule of law. And then it crosses over with this most high consciousness, which is where you believe in things like the spiritualization of humanity, the spiritual and material upliftment of humanity, the improvement of the arts and sciences, rule of law over man, all these far more positive things. And so what I see happening right now is that Luciferian force is taking over for the Molochian force. And what the angels have told me is that in these transitional yugas, the Bronze and Silver Age, that this Luciferian consciousness, which again it's much better. It's still a false light, but it's much better than the one we've been dealing with for the past 6,000 years. And then when we get to the Sat Yuga, everyone will be at most high consciousness in 6,000 years. And so I'm curious, you don't have to follow into that framework, but you can comment if you wish. So these current geopolitical changes and realignments, how does that dovetail into your theory that in which I completely agree with, because the angels literally told me this exact date, Bibhu, as you know, March 21st, 2025, the end of the Kali Yuga. So how do you see these geopolitical changes and realignments outlining that?
Yeah, this is something that has expecting that as the dense energies of the Kali Yuga, they start kind of waning off and we start getting higher order vibrations, then a lot of the deep state will start losing its power. I didn't know how it's going to happen. I never expected that it is going to happen through the means of elections and political leaders, because I start believing in that whole process. But it seems that that is also playing a role, because that is also representing the will of the people to get rid of all the lies and the propaganda and the false flag attacks and everything else that's going on in the world right now. So that changeover was a big, it was very interesting. I kind of expected it, but I didn't expect it to happen so quickly, that some part of the deep state losing its power right away. And with the defunding of the USAID, which everybody in the rest of the world knows is the face of evil, that is how they carry out all of their the work of destabilizing governments and carrying out the agenda of enslavement and suppression across the world. That defunding was an extremely important part of the deep state losing its power. But that's just one of their arms. They have many such arms. And so there's no reason to be feeling extremely happy about that. I'm pretty sure they're going to regroup and try and fight back. And that is why this time period is so important and so crucial, because as on one hand, you'll see the skeletons tumbling out of the closet, you'll see more and more lies being exposed. But on the other hand, that will lead to more polarization and more false flag attacks, more wars and more violence. And that we already see that realignment happening right now across the globe. And so it's a very very unstable period in from every respect. And it completely fits in with the whole idea of the Kali Yuga ending right now, because what happens during this Yuga ending periods is that there's always a realignment. people see things for what they are, and they consciously make choices as to what they support and what they align with. And that is what's happening right now. The polarization is happening, the realignments are happening, the lies are coming out, and more such lies and data and information is going to come out. But like you said, the deep state losing its power, but they seem to be losing their power to this Luciferian power, because they're still bent on materialistic goals. The goal is for materialistic improvement. Their goal is for more AI and more. They're talking about these mRNA vaccines. They keep talking about mRNA vaccines, which means they are in alignment with certain portions of the deep state or certain portions of the elite section who believe that mRNA vaccines or AI is somehow going to lead us to a better civilization, a utopian civilization without any kind of disease, or where everybody is, we're always connected to the internet. Our blood is Bluetooth enabled, and that's the kind of utopian future that they're thinking of, which is somehow better than the other vision of criminal enterprises and child sacrifices and all of that going on. It's better than that, but that's not the ideal vision of the future. So there's a lot of things going on right now, which kind of fits in with the Kali Yuga ending in this year.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I see a lot of those things you're talking about as the Luciferians, in order to pull the hands of the Molochians off the levers of power, they have to very carefully do it, because the Molochians can otherwise just hit the big red button and launch the nukes, in theory, right? Maybe not the nukes, but there's a million things like that. There's bioweapons, right? There's all manner of nightmarish stuff that people who are willing to harm children like that obviously will do literally anything. So they're complete psychopaths, and you have to be very careful. And what they're doing is, it seems to me, is splitting up that group. They've been fragmenting it for a while now, for a number of years now, and they're picking out the lesser parts of the group and still cloaking themselves and trying to look like they're on board with the most important agendas of the Molochian force, to get closer and closer and closer to them, so they can put that garrote wire around their neck and take them out before they can pull the lever and do something really destructive. Because they don't want to rule over a cinder, they want to rule over a globally connected population. And so I don't think they plan on, we'll see, but I don't think they plan on moving forward with mRNA stuff. They are going to move forward with AI. That's just my opinion. They'll have all the surveillance stuff, the blockchain currency, but they won't be worried. They won't feel like they need to put a chip in your brain to control every little action you take with the joystick. That's the Molochian way. They'll control you with little micro incentives and psychological nudge techniques. And, they won't tax you, but there'll be transaction fees on your blockchain currency that are effectively a tax anyway. But it's all voluntary, right? Because it'll all have this voluntary aspect to it that's built on manipulation and big data and total surveillance, and we'll have digital IDs. I don't like that. I don't like this stuff, but I can live in that if it's not connected to this force that's so profoundly anti-human that it would harvest organs or put a brain chip in you and literally enslave you and harm children. If it doesn't have that, but some people who are like narcissistic sociopaths are profoundly wealthy, but they free us from that greater evil, I can live in that. And what I'll do is I'll go do my own thing off to the side and let them do their nonsense. And I will, and other people are already doing this. We can create these parallel civilizations, which according to the angels, for the first time ever, that'll be allowed. So Bibhu, we're gonna take a break here, you and I, and then we're gonna come back for part 2. And so part 2 is gonna be on my Patreon. And if you followed the channel for a while, you know that I haven't put a lot of content on YouTube, and the reason for that is I have been censored and I'm brutally shadow banned. Bibhu was telling me before this channel, what did you say, Bibhu? Something like I should have had 30,000 views on just one of the videos with you because of the counter on your website. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You should have got way more views on your videos than what you're getting now.
Yeah, like 10x just from you. And so it's being brutally suppressed. And that's why I don't I don't use YouTube a lot. Also, I tried to use the way to get money from them, and they took like 60%. I'm like, are you kidding me? What? And so Patreon just also makes it worth my time. So in part two on Patreon, we're going to talk about the journey of the seven sages through all the nakshatras, all 27 nakshatras, and spending about 100 years per nakshatra, and the link to Ursa Major and what that means. And the nakshatras are the Vedic concept of the lunar mansions, and it's something that I absolutely find incredible. And in fact, Prash Trivedi, who I believe is one of the world's experts on nakshatras, I had him on the show a while ago. Fantastic, probably the best book on the subject, or one of them, anyways, in English. And he is of the opinion that the nakshatras used to be their own system, like a separate branch, almost the way like there's Jamani and the Brihat Parashura. I can't say it, but there's a number of different strains of Vedic astrology, and he believes that nakshatra at one point in time was its own system. I'm going to ask Bibhu's opinion on extraterrestrials in part two, and we're going to talk about Alice Bailey's prophecy of 2025, the Avatar, and then I'm going to mention something I know about Archangel Samuel related to that. And then if we have time, and I think we will, we're going to talk about when giants ruled over the earth, giants and titans. And these are based all on amazing articles on Bibhu's website, Ancient Inquiries. So check out his website, which will be linked below. And so, of course, if we also get the chance, we'll talk about this thing called the Black Obelisk of Shalmaneser, which talks about hybrids, human-animal hybrids or chimeras. And so all of that really juicy stuff is going to be on the Patreon in part two. And so if you're interested, you can sign up for free, 1 week free on the link below. And I will see you next time. All right. Bye-bye.